Our scripture comes from Revelation, 6th chapter. I watched while the Lamb ripped off the first of the 7 seals. I heard one of the animals roar, "Come out!" I looked, and I saw a white horse. Its rider carried a bow and was given a victory garland. He rode off victorious, conquering right and left. And when the Lamb ripped off the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd animal cry, "Come out!" Another horse appeared, this one red. Its rider was off to take peace from the earth, setting people at each other's throats, killing one another. He was given a huge sword. And when he ripped off the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd animal cry, "Come out!" I looked, a black horse this time. Its rider carried a set of scales in his hand. I heard a message it seemed to issue from the 4 animals, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, or 3 quarts of barley, but all the oil and wine you want. When he ripped off the 4th seal, I heard the 4th animal cry, "Come out!" And I looked. A colorless horse, sickly pale. Its rider was death, and hell was close on its heels. They were given power to destroy 1/4 of the earth by war, famine, disease, and wild beasts. When he ripped off the 5th seal, I saw the souls of those killed because they had held firm in their witness to the word of God. They were gathered under the altar and cried out in loud prayers, "How long, strong God, holy and true? How long before you step in and avenge our murders?" Then each martyr was given a white robe and told to sit back and wait until the full number of martyrs was filled among their servant companions and friends in the faith. I watched while he ripped off the 6th seal, a bone-jarring earthquake. Sun turned black as ink, moon all bloody, stars falling out of the sky like figs shaken from a tree in a high wind. Sky snapped shut like a book, islands and mountains sliding this way and that, and then pandemonium, everyone and his dog running for cover. Kings, princes, generals, rich and strong, along with every commoner, slave or free. They hid in mountain caves and rocky dens, calling out to mountains and rocks, "Refuge! Hide us from the one seated on the throne and the wrath of the Lamb. The great day of their wrath has come. Who can stand it?"
For those of you who are just joining us, just note that the approach we're taking to Revelation is that was not written to predict events that were going to happen 2,000, 3,000 years later, but rather John is speaking in highly metaphorical language about present events and about the present community and dynamics. And so one of those metaphors being this scroll that is written on both sides and sealed with 7 seals, he sees, which represents the fullness of God's will. And so as he wept, though, an elder turns to him and says, "Don't weep. There actually is one who can open the scroll, and it's the Lion of Judah." And so he turns to look for this Lion of Judah, and what he finds there is not a lion, but a lamb. And this lamb is not just any lamb. The word in Greek is actually not the usual term for lamb. The word in Greek is arnion. Now the beast, its whole purpose in Revelation is to ensure that its will is done on earth, that his will is done on earth, not heaven's will. This corner weighing in at 33 1/3 ounces, arnion. This corner weighing in at 666 million pounds, therion. Who will you bet your money and your life on?
Well, now you're all caught up, in case you weren't with us last week. I'm not saying that you can boil Eric's sermon down to 1 minute 28 seconds. I'm not saying that either. But what we noticed last week was that this scroll was introduced in John's vision. And it was a scroll written on both sides. Most people believe that this is the Word of God. And then it's It's laminated or sealed with these 7 seals, common for envelopes or paper that you're going to put together. But these seals are a little unusual because incredible calamity comes pouring out of this seal. Of course, it's very figurative language, and John's just trying to describe what it is that these seals represent. And we have to remember, like Eric was just saying, that Revelation is not as much about the end of the world and what's going to happen to us after this life as it is about what's going on right now. What is our present reality? And so if we look at it through that lens, maybe we can see some of the things that these seals represent. Have you heard of the 4 horses of the apocalypse? That's another one of these things that gets put forward as the destruction of the world. And at the end, we're going to get trampled by these 4 horses who go out to make war and famine and death. But maybe literarily they have something different to say. So Arnion, the lamb, is the one who can open these seals. And the 4 creatures that are guarding the throne are the ones that call out the contents of each of these seals. And the first seal is a white horse with a rider on it who has a bow in his hand and a crown on his head. The white horse is like the horse of victory, the one who's going to lead the conquest of war. And he comes to bring peace to the world. But it's a peace through war, through killing. The bow represents war, and the Parthians at the time of the writing were a strong force of archers who eventually defeated Rome in 62 AD. So this would have been a very realistic sight to see a bow and a crown signaling victory. And so this horse represents, coming out of the seal, all the just wars. The wars that were fought for defenseless other people. The wars that were fought in our own defense. The wars that were fought for justice. And as we know, as we look back at our history, a lot of those wars aren't quite that pure. Our agenda seems to get in the way a lot. And so we look at this kind of war of peace, and we kind of think, well, it's kind of war. But maybe there was a good thought behind it. Maybe there was a good cause to it. But it's still war. So then the red horse comes out, and this rider is carrying a huge sword. And a sword is a symbol of bloodshed, slaughter, violence. And this rider comes out for war, but it's a senseless war. It's the killing for killing's sake, turning people against each other, bloodshed everywhere. I think this horse represents all the senseless killing that goes on. School shootings, extremist, terrorist activity. Anytime people are just mad at each other and they take their hatred out in ways of war. So this is around us. We've definitely seen senseless war, and even more so in the past number of years, where it seems like every time we turn around, somebody's doing something to prove a point, or maybe not even prove a point. But it certainly doesn't change the world, this violence that we live with all the time. I think we've seen that. And then the third seal opens, and a black horse is called out. And the black horse represents famine. In fact, the rider is holding a scale, and he's yelling, 1 quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. And a day's wage back in that day was called a denarius. It was a Roman coin that represented the fair amount that each person would get if they worked a whole day. So some commentators have looked at this quart of wheat for a day's wages and said that the price of wheat and barley in this passage indicates 10 or 12 times the amount that those things are usually worth. So there was an inequity going on. There was a scarcity of resources. So this horse seems to represent inequity in our world, the wage gap, joblessness, job benefit loss, all the ways that our financial system and our financial security and the things that we worry about are at that place where it feels fearful. And we think of all those people that don't have the resources, which is a growing population. At the end of the month or at the end of the year, we look back, how many people did the community cupboard serve? And we think, a ton of people. And we think, that's wonderful. And it is wonderful that we were able to meet that need. And organizations around Omaha have the same thing. They celebrate how many people they were able to help. But at the same time, can't you say, why are more and more people needing help every year? There is so much need. This is a problem. This is not a celebration. We need to end poverty and, hunger. And so that's what this horse represents. And maybe for you, you've had some times of worry about where you're going to wind up, about what job you're going to get, if that job's going to do it. There's a new class of people at the bottom of the rung, and you could say it's almost not homelessness, but it's the working poor. It's the people who are one paycheck away from losing it all. And that's that's the higher population of people that are in stress right now. Is that right, Mike? That would be correct. All right, good. What? Not good. Exactly. The fourth seal is opened, and a pale, sickly green horse comes out. And this horse is known as death or disease. And we see death and disease all around us. How many people know a person who has died of cancer or is experiencing cancer right now? I mean, all of us. All of us know of somebody who's wrestling with cancer or other diseases. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. You can live the healthiest life you can, and one day something shows up in an image, or you have some kind of heart failure, even though you ran 25 miles a day. And some people can live the most unhealthy life, make terrible choices, and nothing bad happens to them. So here's this sickly, pale horse of death that seems to just ride around and just point to people, no matter if they're making eye contact or not. Kind of a random, capricious way of killing. And I think that represents the kind of world we have with disease and its effects. It doesn't make sense. It's just too random. And then the fifth seal is opened, and instead of a horse popping out, John sees the witnesses of God, and the word witness is equivalent with the word martyr. Someone who has defended their faith, who stood up against people who are wanting to take their faith away from them, and they died because they didn't turn against their faith. And it depicts all these martyrs under the altar, under the table, just waiting and saying, when are you going to vindicate us? We were murdered. When are you going to vindicate us? When are you going to turn the tables? Which I think represents all of our feeling. When is this going to get better? When is there going to be less violence? When is there going to be less natural disaster? When is this going to happen? Of course, the martyrs aren't eternally placed below the table, eventually resolution does come. We wouldn't want to be in that place where we're just under a table for eternity. And then there's the sixth seal that's opened, and John sees earthquakes, and the sun turning black, and the moon turning to blood, and all these huge natural calamities. And this represents the natural disasters that happen around us. Did anybody have water in your basement last week, a couple weeks ago? Yeah, it was big. I was thinking, man, it's going to take a long time for all this snow to melt this year. Wrong. It's 2 days later. That's a lot of water to get places. And so this seal represents the things that are going on in our environment and the stream of natural disasters that we experience and have seen. And I feel like in the last 10 years, that's been on the rise. There's always some natural disaster that's looming. So these things feel very current, not like 2,000 years old, that were written about when John had this vision. And what are we supposed to do with it? I mean, maybe some of you, this brings a sense of fear or at least discomfort. We think about how impossible it is to change some of these problems. How impossible is it to change the wealth gap? How impossible is it to change our environment? How impossible is it to change things that would help the violence in this world not be so violent? Honestly, sometimes I think it's never going to change. You almost feel like giving up, But maybe there's a better solution than just lying down and giving up. So if you stick around for a few minutes, I'll talk about that.
A stick, a stone, it's the end of the road. It's the rest of the sun. It's a little alone. It's a silver glass. It is mine, it's the sun. It's the night, it is dead. It's a trap, it's a gun. The young one it moves, a fox in the brush. The knot in the wood, the song of a thrush. The wood in the wind, a cliff, a fall, a scratch, a lump. It is nothing at all. It's the wind blowing free in the end
but the world will rejoice. You will have pain, but your pain will turn into joy. When a woman is in labor, she has pain because her hour has come. But when her child is born, she no longer remembers the anguish because of the joy of having brought a human being into the world. So you have pain now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. On that day you will ask nothing of me. Very truly I tell you, if you ask anything of the Father in my name, God will give it to you. Until now you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask, and you will receive, so that your joy may be complete. I have said these things to you in figures of speech. The hour is coming when I will no longer speak to you in figures, but will tell you plainly of the Father. On that day you will ask in my name. I do not say that you will ask the Father on your, I do not say to you that I will ask the Father on your behalf, for the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me, and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and have come into this world. Again, I am leaving the world and am going to the Father. His disciples said, Yes, now you are speaking plainly, not in any figure of speech. Now we know that you know all things and do not need to have anyone question you. By this we believe that you came from God. Jesus answered them, Do you now believe? The hour is coming, indeed it has come, when you will be scattered, each one to his own home, and you will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. I have said this to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you face persecution, but take courage. I have conquered the world.
So Jesus is saying these things to his disciples right before he is going, that you're going to have trouble. He never said, like, follow me and life will be easy and you'll have a lot of money. He said, you're going to have trouble, persecution even, but have courage because I've already conquered the world. And as we approach Holy Week, I think this is a good reminder of that was Jesus' message as he was leaving, that we're going to have trouble. And we celebrate that next week. And then Jesus refers to this world and all its difficulties and disasters as similar to the pains of childbirth, which I've heard is really bad. And you have that pain, nobody knows why. I don't think the Bible story is correct on that one, but just because it's painful. And is it worth it when you bring that new little amazing little baby into the world? And as Jesus says, you forget the anguish of your pain. Well, I don't know about that. But maybe a few years later you do, because you do it again. The most painful experience of your life. Let's do it again. When we were having babies, we didn't do just the usual like hospital program or weekend seminar or Lamaze. We did the full-on 12-week Bradley method childbirth. Anybody familiar with the Bradley method? All right. Other crazy people. And it was like a full-on scientific discovery of what goes on during the birth process. You learn everything, things you don't even want to know. And it was intense. And so the idea of the Bradley method is to mitigate pain through practices of focus, breathing, meditation, and relaxation, getting in the positions that really work for you, but also listening to your body. And the idea is, if you can do that You don't have to pass the drugs on to your baby that you have in the hospital. No offense if that's, if you did the drugs in the hospital. Understandable. But that was the idea of the Bradley method, childbirth. And so, the day came, and these little babies came out, and they were so perfect, they were totally worth the pain. I mean, I can't really say that. But I think their mother would agree that they were totally worth the pain. And so we did that 3 times, and they were all so amazing. And then they just give you the baby to take home. We spent months preparing for the birth, and then we take the thing home, and it's like, where's the training now? Nobody tells you anything about that. And there's pain connected with that. Those sleepless nights, the sleep deprivation, and the diapers, and then the defiance. What? And there's pain as they grow up, but is it worth it? Is it worth that pain of leading our kids, even though it's so hard? Not for you guys are really easy. I know. I've talked to all your parents. But yes, of course it's worth it, because that goal is worth it. It's not the greatest analogy, but maybe a little bit applies, that it's possible that in our difficulties, in the oppression that we see around us, in our fear, in all these things, maybe it's worth it. Maybe we hold on to our faith because it's worth it. And Jesus says, your joy will be made complete. So, you're gonna have trouble, but have courage. One of the phrases that occurs most often in the Bible is this one: fear not. All through the Old Testament, all through the New Testament. The idea is to fear not, but be courageous. It's as if God's like, I know, it's really nuts down there. It's dangerous. It's scary. But fear not. Even saying it to his disciples. Fear not. Have courage. He says, I've already conquered the world.